Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, violence between Israeli police and ultra-Orthodox protesters increasing to previously unseen levels overnight. Meanwhile, alleged child sex abuser Malka Leifer is extradited to Australia after 13 long years. And finally, the Israeli embassy to the United Arab Emirates opens for business. Shocking scenes from ultra-Orthodox communities in Israel recorded overnight as police and protesters met each other with force in the streets. Israeli police and ultra-Orthodox residents in at least 3 cities across the country clashing again on Monday. This in the latest from the conflict between Israel's government and the Haredi community over enforcement of coronavirus closures in schools, synagogues, and crowded events, and the violence increasing dramatically. Several rioters being arrested opposite police who are reporting several injuries. Police also using stun grenades, mace, and other crowd control measures to clear away the mobs, with one officer even firing into the air after being surrounded and allegedly jabbed with a blunt object. Rioters and demonstrators in Bnei Brak, for their part, launching fireworks at police, lighting dumpsters on fire in the middle of major roadways, and attacking police with rocks, bottles, and debris. Even members of the press were targeted and forcibly ejected from the scene as they sought shelter from the pummeling from nearby store owners. But most alarmingly, 2 buses were attacked. In the first instance, protesters throwing rocks at and commandeering a bus before leaving it badly damaged. The driver thankfully escaping, though. In the second instance overnight, the driver was not so lucky. A small mob allegedly pulling him out and beating him before setting his bus on fire. That said, residents claiming to have witnessed the bus attacks allege that the suspects had come from out of town. And while several suspects have been arrested in connection, police have not identified who they are or where they're from.
זה לא החרדים עשו. זה קבוצה של נערי שוליים שהגיעו מחוץ לעיר. אני גר פה למעלה.
As for the riots in Ashdod and in Jerusalem, massive mobs of ultra-Orthodox protesters with too few masks between them vandalized parts of the city's light rail system and tore down public property as they pressured security forces. Far from condemning the violent protests, however, ultra-Orthodox members of government are seemingly stoking the fire. Bnei Brak Mayor Abraham Rubinstein, for one, blaming the police for the clashes and accusing them of engaging in collective punishment. Then United Toward Judaism Knesset ministers Yaakov Litzman and Moshe Gafni similarly are calling the police's behavior inconceivable. Public Security Minister Amir Ohana and Prime Minister Netanyahu are rebuking the critics, though, saying a heavy hand will be brought against all lawbreakers, first and foremost against those who attack police. So who's to blame for the recent clashes between the ultra-Orthodox and the Israeli police? Joining us to break it down is Rabbi Dov Halbertal, former head of the Office of Israel's Chief Rabbi. Rabbi Halbertal, thank you so much for being with us. Now, burning buses, attacking people, press, police, what's going on here? Who's to blame? And, you know, are the police guilty of a double standard in their enforcement, or are many among the ultra-Orthodox just not getting the message?
The real and deep truth is that there is a kind of deal, I would have said a dark deal, in between the religion, the Haredi wing, and Netanyahu, the prime minister. And the deal says so. Netanyahu needs the Haredim for his coalition. He needs them urgently, on one hand. On the other hand, the Haredim, they want to behave the way they want to behave in the corona disease. They want to open almost everything, synagogues and schools and institutions and reunions and other, and maybe even weddings. Netanyahu, as a prime minister, he minds his coalition and his benefit. That's deeply the story of all the storm and last storms in the streets, the clash between religion and state. Because
so Netanyahu's political reasons for not getting involved, whether or not that's true. What about the responsibility within the ultra-Orthodox community, who has been most strongly devastated by this pandemic amongst any other community in Israel, really? Why not comply with the rules? It's already been a year, since this virus came to light. Why not study through Zoom or from afar with a distance? Why does it have to be in person, in the synagogue, in the yeshiva?
It's really very difficult for them, especially in this, the Haredim, to be, not to be in those, community and the communities together in those places. That's one thing. The other point is they are afraid, the rabbis and others, that the religious not being, the youth especially, and the small children, not being in schools, not being in the synagogues, not being together with the rabbi, they will left, partly at least, their religious aspect, their religious life.
Rabbi Halbertal, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, meanwhile, the ongoing clashes with police in Haredi neighborhoods are coming as more and more coronavirus infections are being reported. The tally of ventilated patients, for one, now at an all-time high in Israel.
Over 3.7 million Israelis vaccinated now, with over 200,000 people getting their shots on Sunday alone. That's a third of Israel's population now protected against coronavirus, with over 1 million having already received their second and final shots. And this as the national vaccination drive extends to school-aged kids, ahead of extending to the rest of the country in the next few weeks.
הגעתי לכאן כדי להתחסן. אנחנו עוד מעט חוזרים לבית הספר, תלמידים. ולפני החזרה לבית הספר, לפני שאנחנו נחשפים להרבה תלמידים, בכיתות סגורות, למורים.
But still, not nearly fast enough. The infection rate standing strong at 9.3%, bringing the total number of infections in Israel above the 600,000 patient mark. At least 70,859 cases being active, of which a record 369 are on ventilation, and the death toll also rising to 4,437. Meanwhile, giving the UK variant a run for its money, a whole family of Israelis now diagnosed with the so-called California variant, which is likewise more infectious than previous strains of COVID-19. And Israeli officials using the report as a deciding factor in extending lockdown measures, including a block on international travel.
אנחנו סוגרים היום את נתב"ג. בניגוד למה שאומרים, אנחנו מקדימים את כל העולם. אף מדינה לא עשתה את מה שאנחנו עומדים לעשות. אנחנו עושים את זה, אנחנו סוגרים את השמיים הרמטית, למעט חריגים נדירים ממש, כדי למנוע כניסה של מוטציות ווריאנטים של הנגיף.
So, starting today and lasting until at least the end of January, the new lockdown measures include a ban on incoming planes to Israel, except for cargo and emergency-related flights. There will also be a temporary restriction on permits for operating Israeli airlines, and a reduction in the giving of exceptions for departure from Israel by air. The only remaining exceptions including medical treatment, judicial proceedings, and close relatives' funerals. In a consolation of sorts, however, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Finance Minister Katz simultaneously unveiled their latest 9-step plan to jumpstart the economy in the wake of the pandemic. The 15 billion shekel plan, including stipends for all businesses and private Israeli individuals below a certain socioeconomic threshold. Though Attorney General Mandelblit is expressing concerns, urging restraint on matters of resource allocation and legislation in the months before the election. Mandelblit argues that lawmakers must be aware of improper use of government resources and power for propaganda or gaining an unfair advantage ahead of the vote.
And now, with hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 vaccines and only a selection of the population eligible to get them, many vaccines are unfortunately left to spoil at the end of every day. But Israeli tech is now moving to create a solution for that as well. And here with more is James Spiro, reporter at Syntex by Kalkalist. Now, thank you so much, James, for being with us. We know that the vaccines can only last a couple of hours at most when they're outside of minus 70 to minus 80 degrees Celsius, I believe. What does this tech do exactly to extend that life?
Yeah, of course. So what Utilligent does is it creates an Internet of Things smart plug. Now, the smart plug reads the electrical current in any appliance. So what they did is they started with fridges, with coffee machines, and they're since expanding to refrigerators. So the refrigerators are tracked by the smart plugs, and then people that store the vaccines in the fridges can kind of see the health of their refrigerator, preventing any spoilage.
So then make sure there's not any warm spots or random things like that, or
yeah, exactly.
Consistent in the currency draw?
Yeah, so these vaccines have to be kept, depending on who made them, they have to be kept at between minus 20 and minus 70. So it's really a problem when they're transported or stored that it's really kind of essential that they don't get spoiled. I mean, Utiligent was working with Ben & Jerry's, and Ben & Jerry's used to say, well, you know, if we lose some ice cream in our fridge, we lose our ice cream in the fridge. But when it's vaccines for COVID-19, people really, the return on investment is quite high.
It's not ice cream.
Exactly.
It's right. All right, so, you know, is this going to be maybe shared with the international community? Because I know that that's really a really big problem, especially in the United States, where hundreds of thousands of vaccines have gone to the garbage.
Yeah, of course. It's actually a huge problem all around the world, especially now kind of tensions are quite high with COVID. Utiligent is used all around the world. It's used in, anyone can kind of purchase its device and use its platform. In terms of branching out to HMOs, they're starting in Israel, and let's see what happens with the rest of the world. But at the moment, they're used with coffee machines and other appliances.
And so have we seen any, you know, is there data for how much longer this might extend the life of the vaccine after being removed from its original packaging?
So I don't think it's about extending the life of the vaccine after it's removed from packaging as it is transporting them. So I think
Make sure that it doesn't start degrading in the first place.
Exactly. It's really about preventing the spoilage. You don't want to open up a cargo and find that there's hundreds of doses that have been damaged. Or you don't want to find out the refrigerator broke hours after the fact. You want to have a smart device telling you that there's a problem in the distant future.
All right, well, I guess we have another reason to give credit for Israel's vaccination program.
Yeah, it's a great accomplishment.
Seriously. James, thank you so much for telling us about it.
Thank you.
Moving on, former Jewish school principal Malka Leifer is being extradited to Australia now, bringing an end to a years-long battle and a beginning to a new one. 13 years have passed since former Haredi school principal Malka Leifer allegedly fled to Israel from Australia, where she faces 74 charges of child sexual abuse. And it's been 6 years since her initial arrest in Israel, and attempts to return her to Australia for trial began. But with all of her appeals exhausted, Leifer's extradition has finally come, much to the applause of the alleged victims and activist groups behind them.
Today's extradition of Malka Leifer back to Australia to face justice is an incredible day for justice. It's incredible for the 3 alleged victims. For many, many years, it's been a prolonged process with many obstacles they've been facing, but ultimately today we're seeing belatedly the right decision has been made, and the State of Israel has finally extradited Malka Leifer back to Australia.
Wax adding that he hopes Australian authorities will similarly throw the book at anyone who helped Leifer escape to Israel in the first place. Leifer's defense counsel, on the other hand, accusing the media of failing to give his client her fair shake in the court of public opinion.
I can indeed confirm that the process of international transfer has commenced. The Israeli authorities were expected to ensure the secrecy of the transfer operation and to ensure maximum respect for Mrs. Leifer's dignity until she left Israeli jurisdiction. This clearly didn't happen, given the fact that photographs of her being led in handcuffs and leg cuffs were leaked to the press.
Now, accusations of Leifer's alleged abuses began in 2008, when Leifer was still employed as an ultra-Orthodox school principal and teacher in Australia. It was at this time that the Israeli-born Leifer then moved back to the Jewish state. Only 4 years later, in 2012, was an Australian arrest warrant issued, and in 2014, an extradition order was given and Leifer was put under Israeli house arrest. But in 2016, a district psychiatrist ruled her unfit for trial, and extradition was indefinitely stalled. It wasn't until 2017 that the work of a private investigator found her functioning independently, leading to the overturning of her faked mental illness excuse. Her trial in Australia, not quite yet scheduled, though.
Upon arrival in Australia, Mrs. Leifer will be quarantined and will appear by video conference before a judge, who presumably will formally confirm her identity and read her the charges. We hope that she will be held in a place of detention which will respect her religious beliefs and allow her contact with her lawyers and family on a regular basis. Given the coronavirus-related restrictions affecting all aspects of Australian society, I don't expect that the trial will take place this year.
All right, joining us now with more about what's to come in the Malka Leifer case is Manny Wax, CEO of the Voice CSA, or Voice Against Child Sexual Abuse organization. Manny, thank you so much for being with us. Now, where does the trial sit as of now? What comes next?
Well, firstly, it's been around 75 hearings here in Israel over the last 7 odd years, and I've attended most of them. So it's an incredible day for justice in that finally Malka Leifer has been extradited to Australia. In terms of next steps, obviously with COVID-19 restrictions, it's a little bit complicated at the moment. But generally what happens is that she will be offered a defence attorney, a lawyer in Australia. It could be a public defence person, or if she has the means to get private legal advice, legal team, then obviously she's entitled to do that. Then typically we have a committal hearing, which what that essentially means is the opportunity to have a look at the evidence that exists. And what the prosecution has is 74 charges against Malka Leifer in relation to 3 complainants, the 3 courageous sisters, Nicole, Dussie and Ellie. And those 74 charges include charges of rape, which means we're talking about a female school principal against 3 female students, former students. So digital penetration is considered rape. Obviously, there could be a plea deal along the way. So it's important to recognise that while it's been many years to getting to this point, we've only really gotten to where the commencement of the legal proceedings against Malka Leifer are about to commence. Because until now, it has been all about the extradition.
Well, so, speaking of the extradition, can Malka's time in Israel, the last 13 years, including the now refuted, falsified claims of her mental incapacity for trial, can any of that be held against her in the arguments at trial in Australia, or is that irrelevant?
I have no doubt that Malka Leifer will try to bring into play any possible issue that will allow her to evade justice and ultimately, perhaps if she is found guilty or when she's found guilty, to reduce her sentence. The reality is it has all been tested in courts over here. Any tricks that she may try, I expect that the Australian authorities will deal with it strongly and won't really be interested in facilitating Malka Leifer's years of charades where she has been able to so easily deal with over here. So I think we'll see a completely different judicial process. The courts in Australia, from my experience, are much more serious from the perspective of the way, the professionalism, the way things are run by the court system. So I do expect that it will be a judicial process many of us, certainly in Australia, are accustomed to. We don't know how long this entire process is going to take, especially because of the COVID-19 issues. I also expect that the Australian authorities will try to expedite this process due to the fact that it's already been going on for many, many years. And let's not forget, she was helped in 2008 to evade justice by the Adas Israel leadership, her former school, and there are many other things that still need to happen.
All right. Manny Wax, thank you so much for giving us some insight into what's going on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, in other news abroad, Israel's landmark embassy to the United Arab Emirates is officially opening today in Abu Dhabi. And Israel's new ambassador to the UAE, Eitan Naeh, already comfortably falling into his new role in the Gulf. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates have also now given final approval to open their own embassy to Israel in Tel Aviv in the near future. But of course, that's not all. Israeli Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi saying that the new embassies will allow a broadening of the already warm ties growing between the Emirates and Israel, with direct flights, trade, and tourism having already been established since the signing of the Abraham Accords in September. All right, now, assuming this pandemic has an end, many are going to want to travel as soon as it does, myself, for example. Of course, before heading abroad, you need to consider a good travel plan for your phone, and options are typically not great. So make sure to check out the upgrade, now on offer through Israeli company Syntex. And here to tell us all about it is Syntex's commercial manager, Yoav Tamir. Yoav, thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me here, Aaron.
So, first of all, what is the technology here that we're talking about?
Well, Syntex is a digital platform. We are offering global data connectivity for travelers everywhere. Basically, we are using eSIM technology. eSIM technology is a virtual SIM card. You don't need to insert a physical SIM card anymore. You simply get an email, you scan it, and you are downloading it, and basically you are free to use the profile that you get.
And then basically it just automatically switches your data coverage from an international to a domestic account, or it just skews the reading of that and makes it all the same no
It's
matter what?
all so simple. You know, in only 3 clicks, you basically manage your own profile and you start surfing with the appropriate data bundle that you choose.
So what's like the value of choosing Syntex over another overseas data plan that's temporary? You know, that will both work overseas and you know.
We aim to give a borderless or free global experience for travelers everywhere. We do it through connecting with over 600 networks in about 200 destinations. And the experience that you get is as if you are surfing with a local provider at most affordable rates. For example, in the US, we offer very large data bundles from AT&T and T-Mobile for less than $30.
Wow, that's cheaper than most American plans, actually.
I would hope so, yeah.
So wait, so this is practically international coverage worldwide?
Definitely.
Wow. All right. So what does I see here Syntex Cockpit? What does that provide exactly? How is that different from the normal plan that you have?
Well, Syntex Cockpit is a dedicated product that we are basically developing today or in the last few months that is designated for the corporate market. It provides a self-service experience for corporates that they can control, manage in a very cost-effective and a friendly way all their employees' expenses, and that's basically the news.
So, all right, now you're an international travel assistance company, essentially, or a tech company that works with international traveling. How has your company been working with coronavirus?
Well, you know, coronavirus broke out, or the pandemic broke out in March. We came out with our first product back in February, only a few weeks before the pandemic. That was a major setback, and basically it took us a few weeks to gather up our strength and focus. And we have done our research and took this as an opportunity to research, and we believe that the travel market would be be picked up, it would boom. You know, like yourself, many people are really eager to travel, and we believe that the business sector would be the first one to flourish.
So what exactly are your plans for the future with Syntex then?
Well, with the vaccines started circling around, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We are very happy to announce that we have signed with few leading companies from Abu Dhabi, from Japan, from France. And this is great news for the company, offering services for the private market. We are planning now our seed round funding through PeopleBiz, a crowdfunding platform, in order to further develop the Syntex cockpit product. We will launch it and we'll start a pilot with few leading companies in order to revolutionize the telecom market for travelers.
All right, well, I think I made mention already that I'm planning to travel as soon as we can, go visit family and friends abroad. You guys at Syntex will definitely be hearing from me. Yoav, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
All right, now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight and tomorrow are calling for partly cloudy skies with lows tonight averaging 43 degrees Fahrenheit or 6 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect more of the same with highs around 67 degrees Fahrenheit or about 18 degrees Celsius. And before we go though, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. All right, so what you're seeing here is a gorgeous story. A sea turtle rescued off of the Israeli coast and receiving medical attention. And it's all thanks to alert citizens who found her and other turtles like her after they washed ashore during last week's storms. The Israeli Nature and Parks Authority are praising their efforts and calling on the rest of the public to similarly report any turtles or other wildlife to the authorities' hotline at *3639. They explain that even turtles that don't look ill may be in serious condition with internal injuries or pneumonia or even hypothermia. So again, that is *3639 if you see anything. And all right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.28 shekels to the American dollar and 2.57 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Then don't forget, of course, to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and let us know what you think. And subscribe to our newsletter, by the way, for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.